So it's been pretty fun going through the history of the Ontario Hockey League, going through all the different teams and how did they get to where they are today. And of course, there's so many teams that have moved about, relocation or just name changes and whatnot. But there's some franchises that have been staples for so many years. And one of those teams are the London Knights. They got their start in 1965. However, at that time, they were known as the London Nationals. They made the name change in 1968, and how it worked was is that under the national banner for London, they were under the control of the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time. The NHL had a sponsorship agreement with the junior hockey circuit, which then ended in 1968. That's when Howard Darwin purchased the London franchise and decided that he wanted a rebrand. So they had to name the team contest. They came up with the Knights name. And for Darwin, he wanted the colors gold, green, and black. So that's how the look came to be that we know and love if you're either a London Knights fan or just a fan of junior hockey, because when you've seen those colors together, you know it's the London Knights. And the Knights, though, they're kind of an interesting franchise because if you're a fan of the Knights, you have this feeling of us versus everyone. Or if you're a fan of another OHL team, and we saw this at the Memorial Cup recently, where it's anyone but the Knights. And it hasn't always been that way for this London Knights organization. Actually, in the 90s, we had the Spider Knight logo that came about. So the eggplant color came about, kind of like the Anaheim Mighty Ducks in the 90s. And it got the Spider Knight nickname because of just the way the knight looked on the jersey. It was kind of, the colors were sharp. It just looked a little awkward. I do like the third jerseys the London Knights introduced recently, where they took the Spider Knight logo and gave it the green, gold, and black color. It looks really sharp. But getting back on track, the London Knights, they used to be a team that struggled quite a bit. They actually have the worst record in Canadian Hockey League history. That was in the 1995-96 season. They had a record of 360 and 3. So that's just 9 points that they had all season, which is quite remarkable because the turnaround from that point, of course, we all know that Mark and Dale Hunter would eventually purchase the London Knights in May of 2000. They actually purchased the Knights that year for $3.8 million. That had the ownership of the team, and they purchased the London Ice House before moving into downtown London. They were kind of out near the 401, and the Ice House needed a lot of upgrades, and the Hunters, of course, got right onto that. And really, since that purchase, this team has turned around, and right now, this is a team that we're kind of used to seeing being competitive year in and year out. And of course, eventually they would set records and they'd have a team that would be named CHL Team of the Century. So you have London at both perspectives. You have the 90s, the 95-96 season where the Knights were the worst. And then you look at 2004-2005, and that's considered the team of the century. So within a decade, this London Knights organization changed pretty radically. And they've been steady ever since. So let's go through some of the numbers for the history. Starting off with the top 10 scorers of all time for the London Knights. Corey Perry, he leads the way. 140 goals, 240 assists, 380 points in his career with the London Knights organization. Corey Perry, a staple in that 2005 run to the OHL Championship and ultimately the first ever Memorial Cup for the London Knights organization. So Corey Perry, of course, still competitive to this day right now, playing in the Stanley Cup final with the Edmonton Oilers. He was a champion in junior hockey and just one Stanley Cup so far in his pro career, but he's appeared now in 5 Stanley Cups, which is quite remarkable. So Corey Perry leading the way in franchise scoring for this London Knights franchise. Second is Chris Taylor, 150 goals, 228 assists, 378 points. Third, Brian Bradley, 138 goals, 235 assists, good for 373 points. Then you have Dylan Hunter. He's fourth overall in the franchise, 106 goals, 363 assists, 369 points. He's in good company because after that, it's Max Domi. He's fifth in franchise scoring with 331 points, 126 goals, 205 assists. Max Domi, when he was with the London Knights, he was a part of that core group that had those championship runs and appearances at the Memorial Cup. And Domi just lights out when he was playing junior in the Ontario Hockey League. Then at 6 in franchise scoring is Jason Allison, 132 goals, 202 assists, good for 325 points. Scott Morrison, 7th, 116 goals, 200 assists, good for 316 points. Rob Schremp, who was a part of that 2005 London Knights squad, he ended his career with London with 126 goals, 178 assists, good for 304 points. And then Mitch Marner, he's 9th in franchise history with 96 goals, 205 assists, good for 301 points. And rounding up the top 10, another member of that 2005 squad, Dave Bolin, 135 goals, 164 assists, 299 points in his career with the London Knights. Now, when you look at the goaltending, Michael Hauser, he leads the way. He had 93 wins as a member of the London Knights. I remember seeing Michael Hauser, I believe it was the 2010 OHL playoffs when it was Kitchener versus London. And Michael Hauser, fun to watch. He was a little uncharacteristic at times, but he got the job done. And that's why he has 93 wins in his OHL career with London. Second overall with the franchise is Brett Brochu, 89 wins, just short of Michael Hauser's record. And then Gene Chiarello, 84 wins in his career with the London Knights. Then you have Tyler Parsons. He had 75 wins. And Jeff Reese, 5th, with 74. And it's remarkable, just the names that have come through this organization with the London Knights, both players and goaltenders. And they do have a good list of players who have had their numbers retired in the London Knights organization. Starting off at number 5, Rob Ramage. Number 8, Dino Ciccarelli, who's also in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Daryl Sittler, he wore number 9. He actually played with the London Nationals. So Daryl Sittler being recognized with that London Knights team, he had a great run there. Just too bad he's not in the top 10 overall in franchise scoring, but still a fan favorite for Toronto Maple Leaf fans and also for the London Knights. Brandon Shanahan, he had his number 19 retired. Brad Marsh, number 22. 61 is also retired. That's Rick Nash. Patrick Kane, number 88, that's also retired. 91 of Dave Boland and 94 of Corey Perry. So some big names who have also gone on to have great careers in the National Hockey League have all been recognized with this franchise. And it's no wonder that London Knight fans are so proud of this organization and just the players that have come through. And I know for fans that are outside the London Knights, you see these names and you wish maybe a player like that could have been on your team. And I know I don't want to get into the whole politics or whatnot when it comes to player recruitment, but still, it does say a lot when you can have these kind of players representing your team. And a good portion of those players were a part of that 2005 group. It was quite remarkable in that run. Overall, at the time of recording, there have been 191 London Knights or London Nationals who've gone on to play in the National Hockey League. So they're going to hit the 200 mark very soon. And still, it's they've got a lot of players on this team that are going to be in the NHL probably as early as next year. And of course, Sam Dickinson expected to be an early pick at the upcoming NHL draft. So they just continue to come up with, bring up these players and to prepare them for the National Hockey League level. And I don't see that ending anytime soon. Now, looking at their playoff history, I mentioned that Mark and Dale Hunter, they purchased the London Knights in May of 2000. That year, the London Knights missed the OHL playoffs. And that would be the last time London has missed the playoffs since. It's been an amazing run this team has been on. So in 2001, the first year under the Hunters, they were knocked out in the first round. That was by the Erie Otters in 5 games. In 2002, the Knights made it to the second round, and they lost again to Erie, this time in 6 games. And then in 2003, the team continued to progress towards that championship run. They lost in the second round to the Plymouth Whalers, who they had an amazing rivalry with. That was in 7 games. And then in 2004, they set team records in points. They had 110 points that season, which is the most in franchise history up to that point. And they ended up losing to the Guelph Storm in the Western Conference Finals. So that was a 7-game classic. And really, it was a sign of things to come with this London Knights team as Dale Hunter really getting the system in play and really getting that core group of players to buy in as they would go on in 2005 to win the first OHL championship in franchise history. That was over Ottawa in 5 games. And then, of course, they would go on to win the Memorial Cup on home ice against Sidney Crosby and the Rimouski Oceanic. And again, they would go on to the OHL final in 2006. That time they lost to the Peterborough Petes in 4 games. That Peterborough Petes team, they would come back. We'll see them again later in the record books. In 2007, again, that's another Western Conference final appearance. So that's 4 straight trips to at least the Western Conference final for the London Knights. That year, they lost to Plymouth in 5 games. The Whalers would go on to win the OHL championship that season. And then 2008, they took a step back, but they still made the playoffs. They lost in the first round to Guelph in 5 games. And then it was back to the Western Conference final in 2009. They lost in 5 games to the Windsor Spitfires. 2010, I got to cover this series when I was with the Kitchener Rangers. They lost to Kitchener in the second round in 7 games. That was such a high-scoring series. Nazem Kadri was a member of the London Knights that season, and that was after Kadri played with the Kitchener Rangers in that 2008 Memorial Cup. So the fans quite familiar with Nazem Kadri, and really the rivalry between London and Kitchener in the 2000s was very heated every time they met. And we still see that today, that rivalry alive and well between London and Kitchener. It's definitely a classic matchup in that Midwest division. And then in 2011, they lost in the first round to the Owen Sound Attack in 6 games. Eventually, Owen Sound would win the championship that year. But then in 2012, London back at the OHL final. That year, they defeated the Niagara Ice Dogs in 5 games, but then lost in the Memorial Cup final to the Shawinigan Cataracts. That game ended up being an overtime win for Shawinigan over London. The Knights so close to winning that second Memorial Cup. And then in 2013, they won the OHL championship again, causing heartbreak to Barrie Colt fans. That was a 7-game series, and the London Knights ended up winning that game in the dying moments of Game 7. They would go on to the Memorial Cup that year and lost in the semifinal to the Portland Winterhawks. So back-to-back Memorial Cup appearances, but still falling short of getting that second Memorial Cup trophy. In 2014, they ended up losing in the second round of the Guelph Storm in 5 games, but that was the year London hosted the Memorial Cup for a second time. And at the Memorial Cup, they ended up 4th as hosts. 2015, the London Knights, they're back in the second round. They were swept by the Erie Otters. 2016, they won the OHL championship again against the Niagara Ice Dogs, this time in 4 games, but they would go all the way and win their second Memorial Cup. That was against Rouen-Noranda, as the London Knights getting the job done that year. And just in the teens, the 20 teens, that London Knights team, they were deep. That was when you had players like Mitch Marner, Max Domi, you had Matthew Tkachuk and Bo Horvat. The list goes on. Just such a talented group, and no wonder they were winning championships at the pace that they were. And it just came down to the team they had the systems in place that were successful, and they were able to get those OHL championships. And that's why a lot of fans around the OHL a little jealous of what the London Knights fan base has been able to enjoy with all these championships. But still, it is impressive to see what this London Knights team has been able to do over the course of their history, because really it changed after the Hunters purchased the London Knights. Before that, there was questions about would the Knights stick around in London with the Ice House, and then the Hunters take over, and now we're talking about all these championship wins and 2 Memorial Cups since then. 2017, they ended up losing in the second round of the Erie Otters. That was a 7-game series. 2018, they lost in the first round to Owen Sound in 4. 2019 was a second round exit to the Guelph Storm in 7 games. Guelph, of course, would go on to win that championship in 2019. And that's the other thing. When the London Knights get knocked out of the playoffs, we tend to see those teams go on to win championships. You have to put in a full effort if you're going to defeat this London Knights team. And then, of course, we had the COVID gap. The 2020 season was canceled. We didn't have a 2021. So in 2022, they lost in the first round to the Kitchener Rangers. That was in 7 games. And then in 2023, back to the OHL championship they go, and they lost in 6 games to the Peterborough Petes. So that's twice the Petes have defeated London in an OHL final. And then this past season, 2024, they went all the way to the OHL final again, this time sweeping the Oshawa Generals, but then losing to the Saginaw Spirit in the Memorial Cup final. And that one, of course, heartbreak as Josh Bloom would score that goal with just 20 seconds remaining. But still, this London Knights team, it kind of feels like every year you expect London to be competitive, and we're seeing that again, much like we saw in the teen years, but now in the 20s, it seems like we're starting to see that again. Because I wouldn't be surprised if the London Knights again compete for an OHL championship, just with the way the roster is looking based on where we stand right now in the summer of 2024. So in total, the London Knights, they have won the OHL championship 5 times and twice as Memorial Cup champions. And also to note, Dale Hunter, since taking over as head coach, he did have that gap where he coached in the National Hockey League, but all the wins that he's put together, he is the second winningest coach in OHL history. At the time of recording, 951 wins. He's 49 wins away from 1,000, which is quite remarkable, but he still has a way to go to catch Brian Kilrea, of course, the former head coach of the Ottawa 67s. Kilrea holds the record with 1,194 victories. So if Dale Hunter decides to keep going, he will challenge Brian Kilrea for that record, and that'll just add to just the prestige that you kind of feel when you talk about the London Knights. And I know there's a lot of fans, like I said, who would like to see London trip up from time to time, but really this just goes to show the passion of the Hunters. If you have an ownership group that's passionate about winning and not just about the profits, this is what you get. They also do have one of the largest arenas in the Ontario Hockey League, Budweiser Gardens. If you've never been to a game there, it is quite the venue. It's like going to a mini NHL game, and they pack the place. Last I checked, there was a waiting list for season tickets. That's how much London loves this junior hockey team. And the Hunters, they love it as well. They love the community, and they're getting the job done. And it's going to be just interesting to see how this team moves forward once the Hunters decide to maybe retire, maybe to move on and let someone else take over as coach and GM. I don't see them leaving the organization anytime soon, but that transition time will be fascinating because they've developed quite the tradition. They've gone from a team that was the worst in 1996 to now one of the best just 25 plus years later. So it is remarkable to see, and hopefully gives you a little bit more of appreciation of where this team has gone over these years since joining the OHL in 1965. So that's how I see it from the booth. Let me know in the comments section down below your thoughts in regards to the London Knights. Are you a fan of the Knights? Maybe not. Let me know what you think of this team. Again, thank you very much for all your support, and I'll be continuing to do this for the other 18 teams doing the team history videos. I'm also thinking about doing some of the defunct teams, and we'll get to that because I think it's fascinating when we can look back at history. But either way, thank you very much for tuning in. If you've made it this far, I'm stumbling as I talk because I need, I think, another coffee. But if you've made it this far, maybe give a like and subscribe as we continue to help this channel grow and wait for the upcoming 2024-25 OHL season. So again, thank you very much. We'll talk to you again soon.